Welcome to Dungeons and Dragons and Cooking, or as I would have called it, Dungeons and Dragons and Dining. Today we're talking about Heroes Feast, the official Dungeons and Dragons cookbook. And this is the first time Dungeons and Dragons has ever put out a cookbook. And my name is Kyle Newman. I am a filmmaker and an author, and I'm one of the co-authors of this book. And we have reassembled our team, the team behind Dungeons and Dragons, Art and Arcana, a visual history. We've got three of the co-authors here today. Unfortunately, Sam Witwer, who is one of the co-authors on our previous book, was too busy to join the Arcanists to contribute to this book. But today we've got Jon Peterson and Michael Witwer here to deep dive on this cooking tome. Let's start with Jon Peterson. Jon Peterson over there. Jon, you are broadcasting out of, I believe, San Diego today.
I'm broadcasting out of Not on Fire, San Diego.
Jon and Michael it was a joy to work with these guys in Art and Arcana, and again, a pleasure on this because I learned something from these two guys every day. Jon is maybe the foremost expert. I'm going to say it. He is the greatest expert on gaming in the world, and I learn something every time I pick up the phone with this guy. Jon, you want to introduce yourself any further here?
Not really. I mean, like as Kyle said, I worked with him and Michael on Art and Arcana, and I also wrote a book called Playing at the World, which is very long, and I don't recommend people read.
I recommend people read. It is a masterclass in gaming history. And also joining us out of Chicago is Michael Witwer, and Michael wrote a wonderful book about Gary Gygax. You want to tell us about that, Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. The book was called Empire of Imagination, Gary Gygax and the Birth of Dungeons and Dragons. And it was a biography about the co-creator of the game Dungeons and Dragons, which is how was my entry point into writing a lot about this game.
But today we're talking about Heroes Feast. And like I said, no one's ever done a Dungeons and Dragons cookbook before. And it was a chance for us to deep dive into 45 years of Dungeons and Dragons literature, history, lore, and just little tidbits to explore some things you might have picked up in a book or recipes were previously published in the past that we get to explore in a new way. And this project didn't come about in the traditional way. Michael, do you want to talk about how this project was birthed?
Yeah, sure, Kyle. We were wrapping up Dungeons and Dragons Art and Arcana, which was our 45-year visual history of the game, with Penguin Random House 10 Speed. And our publisher at 10 Speed is in charge of a lot of different imprints over there. And a couple of them are really big into cookbooks. And when I say really big, I mean like he's the publisher of Barefoot Contessa, for example. So some really, really major cookbooks. And he came to us with this idea. You know, he thought, hey, wouldn't it be great to do a Dungeons and Dragons cookbook? So we started going back and forth with him and internally about what it would mean to do a really meaningful D&D cookbook, and all of the ways in which food could actually enhance the D&D experience. You know, so we started thinking about like, well, wow, you know, they're both tabletop activities. These are both communal and social experiences that promote connection. So we started talking about this with Wizards, and they loved the idea. And so 10 Speed moved forward with us, and they built this incredible team around this project to support it. Everything from food stylists and photographers to illustrators. And of course, maybe most importantly, this incredible chef named Adam Reed from America's Test Kitchen, who worked alongside with us to develop the recipes of these dishes that we would conceptualize and of course pull out of D&D lore. So here we are.
Yeah, I think you're going to eat food when you play Dungeons and Dragons. It's a constant. You know, you're sitting there for hours, so you might as well eat great food that's curated that you can then apply to maybe some of the themes or stories in the game. And I think that was one of our starting points. That's what was exciting for us to take on this endeavor. Jon, do you want to maybe divulge some of the secrets behind how we approach development, how we look back into old D&D history and publications, and how we pulled stuff out of there?
Sure. And I should say I am in the middle of making a drink as we do this. So if I seem distracted by that, don't be surprised. But hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to see the potion of restoration, which is a good example of the kinds of things that we drew upon when we put this book together. I mean, D&D is not a property, you know, like a Game of Thrones, say, where you can really kind of point to a TV show everybody knows and say, oh, this is the meal they ate on this particular, during the Red Wedding or some particular episode in the game. I mean, instead, it's a multiverse. And in that multiverse, we all play our creative part in putting together what the world is and what people eat in it. And so from a research perspective, I mean, it's interesting to me, anytime I work on the history of D&D, I want to find new angles, things I haven't looked at before. And, being able to go through, for example, all the novels that have been written for Forgotten Realms, for Dragonlance, for Eberron, and of course, all the modules, all the classic adventures, which occasionally feature kind of feasts, banquets, things like it, and to pick out what the people were eating. And then, as Michael said, working in concert with a very talented team of chefs, food preparers, and so on, to be able to render some of those recipes so that you can really experience, minus the monster part. So you can't really give you monster flesh to eat. You can't eat cockatrice, unfortunately, but they say that cockatrice tastes like anything, so chicken will do, as we quip in the book. But, what you'll find within is a selection of recipes that have really been culled from across the various fantasy cultures, the elves, the dwarves, what do we think halflings would like to munch on when they're having their second breakfast and so on. And of course, across all the realms, across Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms, Eberron, and even a few things to harken back to the early days, to like Greyhawk, and you'll see Barovia, a variety of places like it.
You'll even see some menus from some of these varied worlds. Michael, to extrapolate further on what Jon's talking about, maybe let's give some examples of maybe Elven food, eating habits, preparation techniques, and how that applies to them culturally, what makes them unique compared to some of the other races or cultures in this game.
Absolutely. So some of the thinking behind that is kind of like, well, what inspires elves? What do they think about when they eat? How do they view food? Consider that elves live hundreds and hundreds of years. So they're not immortal, but they're more immortal, say, than you or I. So how do they think about food? Well, food is one of these pieces that connects them to mortality, if you think about it that way, right? And this is an elegant, graceful people, ethereal people, and their food is appropriately elegant and graceful in kind of that same way. Elves eat fruits, vegetables, breads, cheeses, and occasional meats. That's one thing that we looked at really carefully is, do elves eat the same way that humans do? Well, one thing that we looked at carefully was, a lot of the belief systems in different Elven cultures really revolve around the value of life. And so one thing we found was that it was very common for elves in different literature and lore in the D&D universe for these people to be vegetarians or pescatarians. Again, and it really always kind of depends on the environment in which they live. Wood elves are necessarily more flexible with their diets because they have less choices. But, Eladrin, for example, might have more control over their dining. So again, it was a really, really fun study. Consider like their iron rations, Quithpa is made of entirely dried fruits. That really is a good hint into how elves kind of view food and the kind of foods they eat. So it was a really fun exercise to go through this kind of deep dive of these cultures and to see like what they're about and what food means to them.
Yeah, and I think the depictions of these things, which will stimulate your imagination and hopefully add another dimension to your gaming table. I think it was a big part for us to get that right. This is really the first time we're seeing Dungeons and Dragons presented visually in a photographic medium, because it's usually associated with paintings and drawings and sketches and other types of more interpretive art forms. But this is photography. And visuals were a huge focus on our last book, Art and Arcana. And I think they're a huge focus this time, just in a very different way. So maybe, Jon, do you want to talk about the challenges of translating some of these fictional things into photography for this book?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the most fun parts of it from my perspective, in that we really got the opportunity, as Kyle was saying, to like bring Dungeons and Dragons to life, to be able to get the props, get the food styling, shoot in these amazing locations. I know there's some few things from my private stash around the house of weird artifacts we brought. We also had professional prop people who came in and helped us get plates and cups and coins and everything else like exactly right for it. And, it was a blast. I mean, we were all there. Kyle, you were there, hanging out with us. Mike, you were there as we were doing this. And, that component of it, I think, will really make the book pop. It'll be something that I think is just great for like browsing as well as cooking things or making your drinks and enjoying them.
Yeah. And Michael, we didn't just rely on photography for this book. We also went and had some original artwork and illustrations created to, again, illustrate the cultures and the diversity that's on display in the D&D multiverse. Let's discuss that. What got you excited about this artwork?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it wouldn't be a D&D book without some great original illustration. And in this case, really 10 Speed spared no expense in really getting a tremendous team of illustrators to do artwork that we felt was appropriate to any D&D book. You have to consider we approached this book not just as this cookbook that's kind of like related to D&D. We thought, well, this is just a D&D book that happens to be full of recipes instead of, say, game mechanics and spells. So with that in mind, we worked closely with the art directors and the illustrators to give them ideas and concepts, which they kind of took and ran with and did a tremendous job executing. I think kind of the whole cycle of food. I think one thing that was really important to us was to remember that it's easy enough to show people eating or drinking, but this is D&D. How do you capture the adventure and the intrigue of a typical D&D illustration through the lens of food? And so we really tried to show not just eating and drinking, but people sourcing their food and farming and hunting and so forth. So that was like a big part of it. And you'll see it in the illustrations is that they really feel like D&D illustrations, but again, they're food related. So that was kind of the fun of it.
Yeah, I love that it gives you that spectrum, takes you through the hunting, the gathering, the preparation, the ceremony, the revelry, the relaxation that's involved, all these different aspects of food preparation, consumption. My favorite part about working on this book was the research, because it gave me opportunity to go back to all these things I loved reading when I was younger, to go back into Volo guides and the old Leaves books from Dragonlance, and reacquaint myself with some of this stuff and try some of the old recipes, and also just get back into the past and then find a new way to make it relevant and bring it to life. Jon, what was your favorite part about working on the book?
I mean, I think ultimately a lot of the, the cultural attitudes of elves, dwarves, and so on, although they've been, discussed quite a bit in novels and specified to some degree in source books, there were aspects of this that, were creative aspects for us as well, to try to really nail things down, to find, is Elven cuisine really more like kind of Nordic, foraged kind of cuisine, or do we think it's more, Japanese style, or do we think it's, entirely vegan? And to kind of really nail these things down and maybe make some small contribution to the D&D corpus in the process. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was fun to speculate and also try to really congeal it into something so people could get a sense of each different culture and the different worlds they live in and what would maybe define them, or at least inspire you to define them for your world. It's great for dungeon masters too. I know you both have been prepping something for today, so why don't we share? Because I know we're running out of some time. Michael, you've got something from Trolltide Festival over there?
Let's see here. All right. We have got Trolltide candy apples, which I'll admit I did not make today. I made 2 days ago, but they've kept pretty well. So these are the Trolltide candy apples. They're exactly as you would expect. They're candied apples. But what's fun about it is that these come from this tradition of this holiday called Trolltide in Waterdeep, which is commemorates the Waterdeep's victory during the Second Troll War. And it's basically Waterdeep Halloween. And these candy apples are used to basically ward off these kids that dress up as trolls, and they troll or treat, basically. You give them the candy apples or salted meat sticks or candies or whatever. And if you don't, you can expect to be basically pranked or egged later in the evening if you don't have these tributes. So that's the idea with these Trolltide candy apples. And this is a particularly delicious recipe that I really enjoyed making.
What's great about the way we approached and curated the menu, I think, is we got a lot of advice from people, but I think it's important that not everything is, you already have a busy game night. You're also not cooking a 4-hour meal simultaneously. Some of these things can be prepared in advance, just like the apples or drinks. Michael's talking earlier about the a drink that took 5 days to prepare. I mean, there's some slow work you can put into this stuff to build up for your game night and just bring it out of the fridge. Jon, you've also prepared a beverage over there. Do you want to talk about that?
I have. Unfortunately, this only takes about 5 minutes to make. So this is a potion of restoration, and this is really cool. It's very kind of blackberry based. You actually muddle maybe a dozen blackberries along with some lemon, some sugar, a little bit of gin gives you the kick in that. Though there's also some kind of blackberry liqueur, this creme de marais that goes into it as well. And it's a very refreshing end of day hard adventure. You vanquish the dragon. Like, this is the perfect celebratory restorative.
That's great. Now, what are you working on next, Jon?
In terms of food, or in terms of what?
Life.
In life.
Work.
I don't know if we want to talk about things we're all working on. There may be something in store that will bring back the Arcanist team once again, though I'm not sure we're ready to talk about that today.
Soon, right? But you've got something coming out this year.
I do.
December 22nd?
I do. MIT Press will be putting out my book, The Elusive Shift, which is a book about how role-playing kind of emerged in the late 1970s, what people made of it when people started calling these games based on D&D role-playing games, and what makes something a role-playing game or not, and kind of how the earliest thinkers kind of grappled with that. So it's pretty academic, like, again, not something I recommend for flipping through pretty pictures of foodstuffs and things like that, but it's I love that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, everybody has their game night that anchors their week, but you have those other 6 nights of the week. And it's been such an honor to work with both Jon and Michael on multiple projects now, because I love reading stuff like the books they write on my non-D&D game night. So I would recommend everything that Jon is putting out there. It's always worthy of your time and pretty authoritative. So thank you, Jon. And Michael, what are you cooking up in the near future?
So obviously, we might be doing something in the future. You never know, as a team, which would be a great honor to work with this team again. I'm working on a young adult, actually kind of more like an upper middle grade novel at the moment, which is under wraps. Not much I can say about it, but I'm pretty excited about it. So hopefully that will see the light of day at some point. But I'm going to turn that question right around on you, Kyle, and ask you, what are you working on right now?
I'm in the middle of rewriting something, and I have a film that's going into production pretty quickly, it looks like. So I am staying busy as a filmmaker, as well as an author on some other projects, and I like to produce as well. So there's a few things in the pipeline, but it looks like I'm getting back to the director chair very quickly this year, which I'm fortunate about. And obviously collaboration again with you guys and Sam is on the horizon, so that's always exciting. And I think what's important is October 27th is when this book drops. That's the first thing on the horizon, and we have a standard edition with a gold titling, and we also have a special edition, or Barnes and Noble edition, which comes with a Jared Blando fold-out map, which you kind of geographically explore some of the cuisine and where you might find some of these ingredients. It's a beautiful fold out. So if you're inclined to get that little extra, Barnes & Noble is the place to find that. And October 27th is the date, and that can't come soon enough. I mean, this book, we've got to see it fully laid out. It's gorgeous, and it's one of those things where it's so beautiful. You're just like, wow, I'm a part of this. This is awesome. This is great. As a D&D fan, it's like, this is something like what Art Arcana did for us was, what's missing. We want to make the thing to fill that void, and this has clearly been missing because this is 45 years in the making. I want to thank New York City Comic-Con and MCM for having us be a part of this. This is awesome. We would have been there in person, but we are here today virtually. So thank you, and thank you, Jon, and thank you, Michael,
and thank you, Kyle.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Yeah, no, you guys filled in all the information wonderfully.
We're off.